um, I think I initially said no to coming on to talk about the Bible. In many ways, the Bible has been so intellectualized that it has not been helpful for me. But then here again, I've been proven wrong. The lectionary picked this verse, this section, and it feels very relevant for our times. So before I share a little bit about what this passage in the Bible in Luke means to me, I think it's important to talk about how I read this text now. How do I come to the Bible? What are the eyes I have, the ears I have? Who am I walking with? Who walks with me? And so whenever I go anywhere now to meet up with people, or if someone asks, who are you? And they ask for you to belong to something, I've largely let go of belonging to anyone or anything. I'm not connected to very many organizations. I don't have a job to anything. So I'm literally Steve Pavey, son of Mother Earth. And when I have to say something, I say I'm a part of the Apache Stronghold, which seems odd because it's odd to them to have an organization because we are family. And so I think it's important to share as I come to this text what it means for me to belong to the Apache Stronghold. I got connected in 2018, really not in an effort to protect, it was to protect Oak Flat, but it was to go on a longer journey across the US, praying, meeting with communities that had been devastated and hurt, where the earth had been hurt, communities had been hurt, and praying with medicine. And that drew me, and I became a part of a family because I learned to see the world with new eyes. Growing up, you might ask, like, how could someone like that looks like me, someone that comes from Norway and Scotland and England, be a member of the Apache Stronghold? Well, here's the good news. You don't have to be Apache to belong to the Apache Stronghold, because the Apache Stronghold are more about, they're about more than just protecting Oak Flat. They're about protecting all of our mothers and reminding us that we are family. And that, and for me, what has happened is I'm able to see the extent to which my family and my ancestors long ago were indigenous to the earth at some point. And this capitalist corporate system has severed me and my family and many of us from what is important, that reminds us about who we are in the world and what is important and what is most sacred. And the gift that God has given us that we all need and must protect if we are to live and to survive and to care for one another. And our religions have largely been co-opted, and Christianity is probably at the top of that list of religions that have been co-opted. And that's why, as I said earlier, I think largely the Christian religion for me has been isolated and captured by a book and put into a building and run by people who have salaries that are connected to people who have to fund that, corporations. And so you can see the disconnect right away that happens when we are stuck in a book where religion is intellectualized and it's no longer in our heart or in our bodies. And you start seeing that when we're in a building and no longer out underneath the oaks on the mountain and along a river, how disconnected we can become to what is most important to remind us who we are and with each other. That this is how I came to be a part. And I think I've never been told by the Apache Stronghold what it means to belong. But for me, this is what it means to belong, is that we see each other, we see the sacred in one another. We see that we are family. I'm Uncle Steve, and I am Brother Steve. And that extends to all of you. It's not isolated to one group. And so I no longer can hurt you or abuse you in your labor if I see you as my brother or sister or as family. And it means that I'm connected to the earth in a deep and a profound way, that my mother, this gift, is what nurtures me and nurtures all of us and must be protected. And this capitalist corporate life, along with the co-option of the story of Christianity or whatever religion you're a part of, has taken that away from us and severed us. So we come to the story of the text tonight. And I think as I come to you as a member of the Apache Stronghold, as someone who is fighting to protect my mother, our mother, protect our future generations, I come to it and I hear this story that Jesus is telling to his disciples to remember to keep fighting, to always pray and never give up. And I see it through the eyes of this widow. And now the story takes on a whole nother dimension to me than I had growing up. And Jesus wants, I think, all of us to know, if we side with the widow, which I'll get to in a second, depending on which side you are on, this is the encouragement Jesus is giving to us, to never give up and always pray, and that these are connected. Prayer is never disconnected from never giving up and doing something. Prayer that is just done in isolation in some building or in some place, it means, actually, I might say, means very little if it's disconnected from your resistance to all that is evil and your persistence to never give up and fight for justice. Prayer and the fight for justice are always connected. And Jesus is telling them a story here to remind them. So what is this story about? We have several characters, and I want to ask you, as we hear these tonight, and I bring new, I bring in a new character for each of them. I want you to begin thinking, which side are you on? How are you reading the world right now? Are you reading the world through the side of the widow or through the side of the judge? So Jesus tells this story, and it's very simple and quick. And he talks about this judge that's in the city who does not fear God nor respect the people. He has no empathy. Do we know any judges like this in our time? I did a quick study. Well, I can tell you that for the Apache Stronghold, who just lost their case, one of their cases that was taken to the Supreme Court because of two judges choosing to hear it. One judge recused himself. And so let me tell you about this judge. This judge was actually Judge Samuel Alito. And he recused himself, chose to not say anything, which sounds great, right? But it isn't, because as I looked into several reports that are not only studying him, but all federal judges, we see the connection they have to their own investments in the stock market of these companies. According to their code of ethics, they are allowed to have mutual fund investments in these companies, but they're not allowed to hold stock or manage the fund. In this case, Judge Samuel Alito actually held stock and influence in BHP. So he recused himself of saying something yes or no. This immediately makes the panel of 9 judges reduced to 8 in the potential. But what about the other judges? According to the code of ethics, you can actually have investments in mutual funds. Who's to say that these other judges do not also have financial interest in other deep ways with what's happening? I looked at the 2024 portfolio of Samuel Judge Alito, and the top 10 companies that he has stock investments in are all oil and gas companies and mineral extraction. And he has and over the last few years, he's had to recuse himself of 64 cases. And there are cases that he's been able to make a say in because prior to the case, the month before, he was allowed to sell the stock and buy stock somewhere else so that he was able to then make a judgment. This is the state of our judges at the Supreme Court level. People who are buying and selling stock so they can make decisions about what happens in this country. And so we have Jesus telling the story about never giving up. He begins with the story of this corrupt judge that lives in the city nearby. And we certainly have corrupt judges living nearby. And the illusion of and the lie of justice that we think that this is justice, we must see through. But we have to see through that through the eyes of someone else in the story. And the next person in the story Jesus comes to is the widow. The widow I think it's really important. I think Jesus told in the telling of the story, picked the widow out for a very important reason. All through the ancient empire and into Jesus' time, the widow was one of 3 of the most vulnerable, oppressed people on the earth. There was the widow, and there were orphans, and there were immigrants, refugees. Of these 3 people, Jesus chooses the widow, but they all, to me, represent a group of people that empire has oppressed and does not listen to and continues to listen to. let me posit to you, after especially this recent tour with Wendsler on the Defend the Holy tour, speaking to churches and listening to his story, and also through the eyes of Reverend Mendez, who introduced me to Howard Thurman, who was looking at through the Black experience of what was happening in Native Americans. I do not know if we have a more oppressed group of people in the United States than Native Americans. And it's why Wendsler calls us, if we are to do anything about what's happening right now, we have to go back to the beginning to hear the original story about how this all got set up. Because they were the original people that this system began coming in and killing through genocide, virtual complete genocide, and stealing of land, and then an attempt to assimilate through boarding schools. And then in the end, those left placed on what we call reservations, but now I know to be prison camps as prisoners of war, because they do not own the land, cannot leave the land, they're wards of the state. And so for me, in hearing this story about a corrupt judge and a widow who has experienced injustice, who continually goes week after week to this judge to demand justice, this is the Apache people. This is Native people in my eyes. And I cannot think of a people, the Apache Stronghold, who have been more persistent in prayer and in action than the Apache in appealing to judges to ask for justice, to appealing to this nation to ask for justice. 27% of Native Americans, I just found out last year, Native American children, because I wanted to go just to the children, the most vulnerable, 27% of them, 1 out of 4, live in poverty. That's double the rate of every other child that lives in the United States. I say all this because the fight to protect the flat is to also protect these children. It's all connected. And we might hear that from Wendsler. Protecting Oak Flat is protecting our families, our children, the most vulnerable. The gift that is, if we protect, is able to protect all people. In the story, this widow wears out the judge, and the judge finally gives in and grants her justice. But I think it's important in this story to see here that Jesus does not tell, because he could have made, this is just a story he made up, it's a parable. But he doesn't say that the judge was changed. He doesn't say the judge became just. He doesn't say the just all of a sudden understood what the widow was going through and that the judge cared. The judge didn't care. He still doesn't care. He still didn't fear God, it says. He still didn't care about people. But he was tired of what in the text actually reads, receiving a black eye from this woman from her persistence. So he finally grants her justice because he's tired of receiving a black eye, because these people have never given up. To me, that seems a bit hopeless, hearing that a little bit that we have to do that. But to me, the hope is in the continue part of the story that Jesus says, is that there is another judge beyond the judges that these empire sets up. And that judge is God, who oversees justice. I will never forget being at the Supreme Court with the Apache Stronghold when we first placed the case before the Supreme Court, and Wendsler was talking, and I felt there was a sense of, like, is this going to work or is this not going to work or not? And I felt this complete freedom, and this is where we're supposed to be. We have to keep fighting. When he pointed above the Supreme Court and asked people to look at the clouds in the sky, the few trees that were around, the bird that was in the air, and said, above this court, which our eyes are all directed at, are the heavens and the earth. And this is where God resides, and our spirit that comes and speaks to us. And this God administers justice and will administer justice for us, apart from what these judges do. In the meantime, we keep fighting. And we do not pretend that these judges are who administer justice. Justice will come from God, but we will keep showing up. We will keep praying. We will keep persisting. We will keep fighting, and we will not stop. That's what I'm hearing from this story. And my hope comes that I'm a part of a community that hasn't stopped fighting. And even though the Supreme Court has now said that we'll not hear this one case, maybe Wendsler will be talking about 2 more cases that will be coming, but we will not stop fighting for this case or for Oak Flat, but for all those who are lacking in healthcare, for all those who are mistreated in their jobs, have not got the salaries, those who are dying because of lack of food and housing. This fight is all connected, and so I need to end here. But this is where I wanted to share more personally tonight about why and what this verse means to me before passing it on to Wendsler.